And as Iran has become a full member of the SCO, which is the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. And so, just as quick as you can, explain what that is and why this matters.
So this is basically a group that's it's an organization that includes China, Russia, India, Pakistan, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, and Kazakhstan. It's not. It's more. There's sort of a debate over how important this is. There's a couple of different articles that came out about this. But essentially, Iran has been an observant member of this influential group since 2005, and they were admitted this year as because originally the problem was that Iran was still under UN sanctions, but this group does not recognize unilateral sanctions, so they were let into the group. Now, the Iranians in Raisi's speech, the hope with Iran is that they will be able to use this membership to boost their prestige and their diplomatic and economic gains. So, Raisi's speech was actually pretty he's talking about, he says, Iran's geopolitical position, population, energy supplies, transport potential, workforce, and culture can provide a quote meaningful momentum to major regional master plans, including China's Belt and Road Initiative. He says the world has entered a new era. Hegemony and unilateralism are failing. The international balance is moving toward multilateralism and redistribution of power to the benefit of independent countries. He's hoping also that being in this group can help him get some sanctions relief. It's not exactly clear how effective that will be, but he's saying unilateral sanctions are not against only one country, as has become evident in recent years. Sanctions have attacked more independent countries, especially members of the organization. I think he's trying to get he's talking implicitly about Russia and China and looking for support.
I
He
would
also
guess though,
talked about
just real quick, Connor, that all
sure.
these countries are in the region, and so if let's say Tajikistan was importing anything from Iran and Iran gets sanctioned, then Tajikistan can no longer import that from Iran, and so while the U.S. says, oh, we're not sanctioning Tajikistan and they could buy that somewhere else, I mean, it's probably gonna be more expensive and a different product, not exactly the same. There's going to be all kinds of problems with it. And so, when you do sanction Iran, you sanction all their trading partners.
Oh, absolutely. And as a part of that, well, that's one of the reasons why I was saying it's kind of unclear how effective these agreements have been. But there were quite a few bilateral talks, including with Tajikistan. So Raisi met with Tajikistan's president Imomali Rahmon, and the two set a target for $500 million in annual bilateral trade, 10 times higher than current levels. That now see some people are saying that Racy so they interview a guy who's a visiting fellow at a German foreign policy think tank called the Institute for International Security Affairs. His name is Hamed Riza Azizizi. Probably pronouncing that wrong, but the name of the article is "What Iran's Membership of Shanghai Cooperation Organization Means," and he says the issue is Iran looks at it as a concert of non-Western great powers rather than a modern international organization. They view it as an anti-Western, anti-U.S. setting. He was talking about how, basically, Raisi, like I said, is saying that they've been unfair in the negotiations with the Iran deal. They only turned to diplomacy to their benefit through using it as tools of threats and pressure and this sort of thing. But he says this is despite the fact that countries such as Pakistan and India, the guy from the think tank who says, Pakistan and India are the America's close partners, and he says, and even Russia and China have not been willing to openly challenge the U.S. on the global scene. And he says these two misunderstandings, as well as Iran's self-perception as a natural hegemon in West Asia, would make the whole thing appear to Iran leaders as Iran joining an anti-Western great powers to join other anti-Western great powers to form a strong coalition to challenge U.S. hegemony. Well, there's sort of doubts about that. And also, they're sort of trying to strike a balance, as well as indicated by them admitting also Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and Egypt as dialogue partners as well. So, um, and I will say this, that more evidence of the fact that Iran thinks that this will, it's obviously it is a big deal, but I mean, it was announced by, let's see, what was the guy on Twitter? The Iranian security chief Ali Shamkhani tweeted that the political obstacles to full membership had been removed. He posted it in Farsi, English, Arabic, and Hebrew. So, sending a message to other
Right.
people in the region, other states like Israel, et cetera. And so, but yeah, no, I mean, it's basically they interview another expert from a think tank in Tehran who says that he says Iran could gain significant access to the Central Asian region, could be regarded as a market for exports of Iranian goods, but only time will show how much of these potentials Iran can realize. But he believes that sanctions could be roadblocks to a way of achieving those goals, but they will not halt Iran's economic progress. So it'll be interesting to see for sure. Raisi was supposed to meet with Putin as well, but Putin had to quarantine because somebody in his core group of advisors tested positive for COVID.
Yeah. All right.
But they are looking at expanding the the comprehensive cooperation agreement that they established with China back in March, and also expanding a pre-existing agreement with Russia. So, like we said, maybe they can help them skirt around sanctions. I don't know how that's all going to work, but it would require, I guess, China and Russia taking a greater stand against, this U.S. economic warfare, which may inevitably be necessary. Who knows?
All right, Connor, thanks so much for coming back on the show again and breaking down this Iran stuff. There's so much to it, of course, and I'm glad I had like an entire show to just dedicate to it, because sometimes it's hard to tie in, which is important when you're talking about like the nuclear deal, what Israel's doing, what's happening in Syria and Lebanon, what's happening with China, because all that definitely plays into, how willing Iran is to negotiate with the U.S. and, of course, what the U.S. is going to do.